New microphone powers!
Activate! Hello, this is the Wandering Detective, and it's time for another Creepypasta review. Last time, we took a look at Pokemon Lost Silver, one of the most famous Creepypasta out there. Today, we'll be looking at something a bit more obscure from the Pokemon section of the Creepypasta wiki. This is Pokemon Strangled Red. I really like this Creepypasta, though it does have some glaring flaws that need to be discussed, and I'll get to that later on in the review. We'll summarize the story before we take a look at the Creepypasta's plot, writing, creativity, creepiness, and other factors, with 20 points total for each, and we'll see how the story holds up out of 100 points in the end. Scoring is based with a score of 10 being the middle ground, not too horrible but not too impressive. If the story is lacking in one department, it'll go down below 10 accordingly, and if it does well in a department, it will go above 10. If it does something completely standardly, the good and bad balance each other out, or it just isn't as focused on one of those aspects, it'll stay around 10. Now let's not let this intro drag on, and let's get to Pokemon Strangled Red. Strangled Red starts with, what else? A person getting a supposedly hacked game! But this time, the author finds the cartridge in the trash, so it's totally different. The cartridge itself is normal, except for the sticker being torn across Charizard's neck. Foreshadowing! So it turns out this particular version of Pokemon Red's start screen says, Pokemon, Strangled Red version. Title drop. The author then calls it a hack and questions why it's Strangled Red and not the more sensible Strangled Blue, which is actually a legitimate question. Also, the title screen stays on Charizard instead of cycling through the starters. Curious, Mr. Author starts the game and tries to click continue, but the game refuses to. So, he tries a new game instead. So the game becomes interesting when it turns out that this version of Pokemon Red has a few minor differences, namely a new protagonist and plot. The protagonist is called Steven and has hair so manly and flowing that Sephiroth and Fabio weep with jealousy. He also has a level 5 Charmander named Miki. This is important, by the way. It'll be on the test. Blue is replaced by Steven's brother and rival Mike, who had a Squirtle. After a thrilling battle of scratching and tackling, the player discovers that this hack serves as a prequel to the original games. As it goes on, the author starts to like the hack, discovering NPCs act kind to Steven and that it seems to have a legitimate story. However, the story gets weird when Steven arrives in Lavender Town. I'll explain what's wrong here in a bit. Hoping for a Ghastly, the author tries to go into the Pokemon Tower, but Steven refuses to enter for some reason. Ignoring it, the player goes on and finishes the game, with Mike replacing Blue as a champion, of course. After beating the champion, the game cuts to Mike and Steven in their room, with Mike being a pest to Steven, wanting to borrow Miki to complete his Pokédex. I wonder if he knows about the other 4 regions he still needs to visit to do that? But Steven reluctantly hands it over anyway, which makes the game apparently crash. See, this is why you never lend anything to siblings. So, the author restarts the game, being greeted with a 1 year later message. And here's the Lavender Town theme. Again in a bit. So Miki's gone with all of Steven's Pokemon, money, etc. As he walks, Steven gets more and more miserable, and the player realizes that he had given up on the world and Miki had died. Again, never lend anything to siblings, they break everything. All the NPCs try to comfort Steven, and all the Pokemon awkwardly avoid him. The player walks to Pallet Town for answers and decides to sleep in his house. When he wakes up, Steven's talking about looking for it. So the player swims to Cinnabar Island and finds the missing no. Okay, now you're just trying too hard. After catching Missing No, the player heads back to Lavender Town and uses Missing No in front of a tombstone. After that, it states that Steven obtained mat sign, number sign, dollar sign. Steven then walks by himself towards Pallet Town, with the Lavender Town theme playing slowly the whole time. He goes to his house and stops by his brother's bed. When the player checked his trainer card, it shows that he now looks like a Heartless or something, and is named !33. He tries selecting mat sign, number sign, dollar sign, and is forced to click a new option of Strangle. See? The title is relevant! Then there's a snap sound and the game shuts off. This is why you don't strangle your siblings either. Well, that's the story. Now how does it hold up? Plot is this story's strong point. You get legitimately interested in the quest of Steven, or !33, and it's a rather creative take on the idea of finding a hacked game. It's by far my favorite aspect of the Creepypasta. Aside from some annoyances I'll get to in a second, it's a solid story. 18 out of 20. As with Lost Silver, the writing itself is okay. Punctuation and grammar is awkward a few times, but never too horrible. However, the story loses points for being snarky towards creepypasta cliches as a whole, sarcastically claiming the cartridge isn't haunted and basically talking readers out of the creepy feel. Well, at least it gets the plot across well. 13 out of 20. Snarky, but decent. Okay, here's where we lose some points. The plot itself is very creative for Pokemon Pasta, with the plot of Steven being very interesting and refreshing. But then we get to its use of Lavender Town and Missing No. The plot was going along smoothly, but the jamming in of these overused trends just makes the story feel forced. I honestly think that the story would be more effective if it did not decide to randomly mash in creepypasta cliches like that. Seriously, spend about 5 minutes or so skimming Pokemon pastas on the wiki, and see how many mention either Lavender Town or Missing No somewhere in them. 10 out of 20. Refreshing plot, stale material. I don't get the sense that this was intended to really creep anyone out. The only legitimately creepy moment is the end, where !33 is hinted at strangling his brother. Other than that, there's really not much here. You really won't get much scares reading this creepypasta. 8 out of 20. Doesn't really seem to be trying too hard. Well, this is a tough one. Unlike Lost Silver, there is no playable Strangled Red as of yet. However, thanks to fans, we do have fan art and screen caps to entertain us, some of which look very nice and convincing, and really helping gain the story across. However, not nearly as impressive as others like Lost Silver or Been Drowned. 12 out of 20. Neat, but not too much. Final score, 70 out of 100. Don't get me wrong, the plot itself makes the creepypasta very enjoyable. However, it does lose some points because it's not very effective as a creepypasta. With the snarky writing, lack of scares, and distracting cliches, this seems more like a pretty good fanfiction at times than it does a creepypasta. I suggest you read it, but not if you're looking for chills or thrills. Remember to post suggestions for more creepypastas in the comments, and tell me whether or not you want me to review a good or a bad pasta next episode. With that, I will see you guys next time. 10 out of 20. Refreshing. I just said refreshing.